This recording is from a presentation made at the San Antonio Manufacturers Association entitled Thinking in Systems for Creating the Ideal Organization. It includes 3 stunning videos: the 5 principles of systems thinking, how Toyota improved hospital care, and how wolves changed the course of rivers. Here's how to transform your organization to create more value and sustainability that makes trying to improve operational optimization obsolete. This is achieved through systems thinking, a new way of thinking that's proven to rapidly transform organizations into creating new value for the customer and the organization as a whole. The ideal design ensures that you are always future ready. Now here's how you can lead this journey. Last night, your entire organization burned to the ground. There's nothing left. Your assignment is to rebuild it from scratch. Would it look and behave exactly as it does today? Most managers say no. So we ask the question, if you could start over, what would it look like? Again, most managers say they don't know what it would look like. So if you don't know what it looks like, if you could rebuild from scratch any way you want, how do you know what changes to make today that would also prepare the company for the future? The fact is, if your current system has problems, it was designed that way. No organization can rise above the constraints set by leadership. That includes the way your organization is designed. So what are your constraints? Are they cost overruns, production low sales, delays, supply chain issues, third party, declining customer satisfaction, workforce skills? Leadership has often treated major constraints as a people problem and not what it really is, a system problem. SAMA leader Mike MacGyver, in his seminar, Achieving Excellence in Leadership, said, "People don't take time to think." I suggest that they don't have time to think because they're putting out fires and other crises, and as we'll explain, they don't know how to think. So here we bring in the concept of systems thinking. Here are 5 principles of systems thinking presented by Dr. Russell Lakoff.
A system is a whole, spelled with a W, that consists of parts, each of which can affect its behavior or its properties. You, for example, are a biological system called an organism, and you consist of parts, your heart, your lungs, your stomach, pancreas, and so on, each of which can affect your behavior or your properties. The second requirement is that each part of the system, when it affects the system, is dependent for its effect on some other part. In other words, the parts are interdependent. No part of a system or collection of parts of a system has an independent effect on it. And therefore, the way the heart affects you depends on what the lungs are doing and the brain is doing. The parts are all interconnected. And therefore, a system is a whole that cannot be divided into independent parts. Now, that has some very, very important implications that are generally overlooked. First, the essential or defining properties of any system are properties of the whole which none of its parts have. For example, a very elementary system you are familiar with is an automobile. The essential property of an automobile is it can carry you from one place to another. No part of an automobile can do that. The wheel can't, the axle can't, the seat can't, the motor can't. The motor can't even carry itself from one place to another. But the automobile can. You have certain characteristics, the most important of which is life. None of your parts live. You have life. You can write. Your hand can't write. That's easy to demonstrate. Cut it off and put it on the table and watch what it does. Nothing. You can see. Your eye can't see. You can think. Your brain can't think. And therefore, when a system is taken apart, it loses its essential properties. If I bring an automobile into this room and disassemble it, although every single part's in this room, I don't have an automobile. Because the system is not the sum of the behavior of its parts, it's the product of their interactions. Now, what does that mean? If we have a system of improvement that's directed at improving the parts taken separately, you can be absolutely sure that the performance of the whole will not be improved. And that can be rigorously proven. But most applications of improvement programs are directed at improving the parts taken separately, not the whole. basic principle. An improvement program must be directed at what you want, not at what you don't want. A systems principle that is ignored in most of the practices is that they practice in a way which derives from the work of Walter Shewhart at Bell Telephone Laboratories in the 1930s. Shewhart developed statistical techniques for determining defects. A defect is something that's wrong. Now, this should be perfectly obvious. When you get rid of something that you don't want, you don't necessarily get what you do want. And so finding deficiencies and getting rid of them is not a way of improving performance of a system. And determining what you want requires your redesigning the system, not for the future, but right now, and asking yourself, what would you do right now if you could do whatever you wanted to? Because if you don't know what you would do if you could do whatever you wanted to, how in the world can you know what you can do under constraints? But people don't ask themselves that question. Continuous improvement isn't nearly as important as discontinuous improvement. Creativity is a discontinuity. A creative act breaks with the chain that has come before it. It's not continuous. One never becomes a leader by continuously improving. That's imitation of the leader. You never overcome a leader by imitating them and improving slightly. You only become a leader by leapfrogging those who are ahead of you. And that comes about through creativity.
Here's the pitfalls of a parts-first design and improvement mindset. In this illustration, product development is assigned to create the very, very best car in the world. And they're going to do it by copying the very best parts in the world. You get the front end from NASCAR for speed, the back end of Caterpillar for load and durability. You've got the engine of the Rolls-Royce, the transmission of the Mercedes, the body of the Cadillac, and all these parts are the best in the world, but you still don't have a car because none of the parts fit. They were not designed for interaction. You see, the purpose of the parts are to interact to meet the goal of the system. Otherwise, the parts have no reason to exist. The gestalt is the system as a whole is more valuable than the sum of its parts. Value to the whole is created by studying the interactions of the parts within the organizational system. All parts, including people, processes, departments, and external third parties. So how do you begin the journey to the ideal and to real transformative change? You must envision your ideal system and work backward to where you are today. So to begin this, you start with mapping your current system. The current system can reveal constraints preventing flow and exposing risks as well as opportunities, revealing what we do want in the system, not just what we don't want. This chart is a little hard to read, but it shows the flow in a specific process for, in this case, payroll, and it shows all the different departments and people who are involved. But also in the legend includes the areas of constraints. So the map is designed to expose categories of constraints that are preventing flow and new value. It's not just finding where the errors and defects are, but where can we find value and where can we find areas of crisis that could take the system down. Successful systems are data-driven. Every department can supply meaningful data and even personal input about the current system and its constraints. As I stated before, no organization can rise above the constraints set by leadership, and there's no bigger constraint than siloization. Siloed companies rely on linear, reductionist thinking for making improvements. System failure results when we improve parts without understanding unintended consequences to the whole. Siloed thinking causes bottlenecks. We have siloed functions, people, departments, and third parties. We've got tyranny of the status quo, like we've always done it this way, or we'll wait and see, which means we'll do nothing. We have outdated or poorly planned technology, or counting on technology as a magic bullet. We have reliance on rework and workarounds, which are probably not documented. We have untapped people and resources, and poor priorities of what to change. To paraphrase Joseph Juran, a manager's job is to collect and share various insights from across the organization to continuously improve the system, so workers can be successful in the system and provide constant feedback. The ideal identifies the attributes of what we want in the system, not what we don't want. We want a free-flowing system of ever-improving quality, innovation, cooperation among the departments, shared learning, crisis management and sustainability, customer acquisition, service and loyalty, engaged, empowered, energized workers who are well trained, marketplace competitiveness, and risk-taking, and ventures into new markets. These are not platitudes. These are attributes. Quality, innovation, and all the rest require a collective effort from all of the departments within the company. With the ideal design, we have freedom for finding and asking the hard questions that lead to the ideal. So anyone can ask, what are we really good at? What are we really not good at? What functions should be improved or jobbed out to a third party or eliminated altogether? When Steve Jobs rejoined Apple, he immediately destroyed company barriers in most product lines and egos. He even allowed managers to cannibalize other Apple products to make new ones because he said if Apple doesn't do it, other companies will. This is why Apple invented the iTunes and Sony did not, even though Sony owned the music. He knew the secret to protecting Apple's market leadership was to keep ahead of the curve, even at the risk of competing with an existing Apple product. He had one vision: to make insanely great products. Jobs knew that the only effective judge of his company's performance is the end user. TOC, the theory of constraints, asks us three questions: what to change to, and how to make the change. We have to remember that changes need to be improving the whole according to the ideal. This is where siloed companies are totally ineffective because they don't know how to prioritize which changes to make that will improve the whole. What is the ideal design's secret weapon for change? You never change things by fighting the existing reality. We know how hard that is to do. To change something, we build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Therefore, the improvements and solutions that we make should be simple and obvious. What we're trying to do is make these simple changes so that we can build a positive momentum, especially to those who resist change. Tests should be inexpensive, low risk, and non-committal. So I usually create 3 plans with an ROI to test as many concepts as possible. It should be possible to test things at a low cost, whether you're doing something internally, manually for a proof of concept, or you're jobbing it out to another organization that has the technology that you need. The idealized design prepares for a variety of disruptive crises, because managing a crisis when it starts is too late. Desperation during an unforeseen crisis forces managers to make uninformed, panicky, and costly changes. Cooperative organizations can create crisis scenarios through simulations of an event. Simulations can reveal the dangers of inflexible dependencies, such as internally, because there's a lack of training or a set of procedures, or externally, because there's a reliance on single-source vendor that cannot deliver on time. Crisis scenarios can expose the organization's Achilles heel, so these simulations can deliver to upper management a compelling case for making changes now. Which brings us again to the topic of quality. It's a question of fear or leadership. When cost-cutting is mandated from the top, we end up with a slippery slope that can be very, very costly. We have loss of skilled workers who are either fired or motivated to leave the company from fear. This causes downtime, missed deadlines, defects, rework, overtime, and the customer returns and dissatisfaction will lose us more market share. So the sweeping cost cuts can actually accelerate losses during a crisis. We need to cease reliance on inspection. All departments need to cooperate to build quality into the system. It is not just the end product we hand to the customer, it's a quality system from a total quality operation. So the Deming chain reaction makes us focus on improving quality, and then costs can decrease because of less defects and rework. Productivity improves. We'll capture more market share with better quality and a lower price, and we stay in business and grow and actually hire more and more people to meet the growing demand for our products. Now, what's the difference between continuous improvement and innovation? Oftentimes, there's a choice between improving the status quo or future-proofing the organization to the ideal. The question is your organization designed for the status quo? Successful organizations are built for performance improvement, not for innovation, which means smaller companies might be more open to innovation. Oftentimes, innovation must be disruptive. The horse and buggy could never evolve into a car. It required disruptive innovation. So what is innovation? It's a cycle, not a light bulb. There's a creative phase and an execution phase. Innovation is not an inspiration spark. It is the delivery of new value using new knowledge to better serve customers. Better service to customers creates additional value to companies. However, most companies are under the strain of the tyranny of the status quo. So why don't more organizations embrace systems thinking and the idealized design? Fear. We're taught in schools that mistakes are bad, and this is confirmed in the marketplace. There's actually two types of mistakes: mistakes of commission and mistakes of omission. Commission is when someone makes a mistake, places a wrong order, someone causes a machine breakdown, and other types of mistakes that can be put on the books. Now there's the fear of omission. This is where we don't do something that could make a difference. When Kodak had the opportunity to buy Sterling Drug Store, it seemed like a perfect fit. It was not. It was a disaster, and that was a loss that was reflected on the books. But later on, they had the opportunity to buy Xerox, and they did not. That was a mistake of omission that was not recorded anywhere on the books, but cost the company huge value. Now, are your workers self-focused or team-focused, which is a good system? We're talking about the appreciative system. It's where people work together to help each other, whether they benefit personally or not. We ask the question, what can I do that can change the outcome for somebody else in the organization that will improve the system? In other words, what can I do for you? And I can tell you what you can do for me. And that's the essence of teamwork. In Lou Gerstner's book, Who Says Elephants Can't Dance, he shared how IBM was saved from bankruptcy by saving them from themselves. Siloization was caused by people who were more committed to their power and position than to the organization's health and future. Gerstner stripped the separate business units of their autonomy and power. He then unified them into a common goal system where everyone's success or failure depended on others who were not directly part of their department. The success of one department was completely dependent upon the contributions from another department. The ideal organization creates a culture of continuous learning and sharing. The organization as a whole only learns when everyone in it has access to the learning when they need it. You can learn about systems from experts. These 4 books will help you greatly advance your understanding of systems and the idealized design. You can learn a lot about systems thinking and the idealized design from other industries.
Too many American hospitals are sick. I'm Lloyd Dobbins. Hospitals cause death, error, waste, expense. They cause misery and dissatisfaction for their patients and employees. You probably already knew that. But what you don't know is all of that can be fixed. It won't be easy and it won't be quick, but all the things wrong with hospitals can be fixed. If we do fix hospitals, their cost will go down. Down, not up.
Americans are accustomed to getting everyday miracles out of the healthcare system, keep us alive and well past what our parents could have ever imagined, or our grandparents ever imagined. But the system that delivers those miracles is also rife with waste and inefficiency to an extent that I think very few Americans appreciate. 100,000 people perhaps dying each year of in-hospital infections that could have been prevented. 100,000 medication errors in hospitals each year that kill people.
We're going to show you 2 hospital groups that are improving, that are healing themselves. One is in Pittsburgh, the other is headquartered in St. Louis. Their treatment does not involve insurance and does not involve the government. It does involve recognition that hospitals are more complex than they used to be.
Complexity has increased both in technology, medications available, treatments, payment mechanisms.
The emergency room could do of themselves. It turned out to be an entire hospital activity. That's the greatest example that I can think of for systems thinking.
Sister Mary Jean Ryan heads SSM and uses systems thinking to make improvements. We'll get to it later, but remember the words systems thinking.
If you try and do it just in the emergency department, it'll fail. You have to have the support of housekeeping to get the room clean so you can get the patient out of the bed here and admitted to the hospital. You have to have the commitment of administration. It has to be a whole institution-wide initiative.
This was going to require a systemic change of our whole organization and a totally different culture.
And I think what systems thinking says is that you can't do one thing in isolation without knowing that it's going to impact all other things.
I said we would get back to systems thinking, and here we are. Systems thinking can be complex, but in this instance it is not. It is basically how you see things. Instead of seeing one huge mess with one problem piled on top of another, you see differently. You see with what people call new eyes. You see how you and your work fit into the system and how you and your work connect to the other people in the system.
In a complex environment like healthcare, everybody doing their very best obviously is not good enough. We have to have a systems approach to be able to tie all this together.
We are really now beginning to understand that we have archaic processes in our hospitals that for the most part set up our clinicians in an atmosphere that allows them to make errors. It's because the processes that we have either stress our nurses, don't allow physician interactions correctly, but the problems that we have are not mostly the individual, and it's more the system.
To solve the problems in the system, you have to see the system as you have never seen it before. It is crucial that you see it with new eyes. You have to see the processes working together. You have to see the whole hospital system. You have to see how blaming people does not help. You have to see how to practice continual improvement, and you can learn how to see all of that. That's part of what American experts taught to Japanese industries to save a bankrupt economy after World War II, and it worked.
And mobilizes a team to attack the chronic waste, and in this case, successful.
Using what Toyota Automotive has learned about quality could be the best medicine our hospitals can get.
What do you mean Toyota Productions is going to come to Shadyside Hospital? But when you start tearing apart the principles that they have and how they do get to the root of a problem and find problems and fix it so that it's never broken again, it's amazing.
Toyota is really about designing work, doing the work, how do we understand work, how do we improve work. So it's not just about cars, it's about how we do our work.
The methods we have shown you are known, tested, and proven. They do not require more staff or expensive consultants. They do not require the health insurance industry or the federal government to do anything. Improvements can be made starting today in every hospital in the country. Costs will come down. So the question now becomes, can we afford not to heal our hospitals? We can, if we want, not do anything. But if we decide not to do anything, we have to accept that every day, 500 people will die in hospitals in the United States who did not have to. You and I might be among them. Costs will come down. About $1.7 million saved with fewer deaths as coronary bypass readmission declines 4.7%. 85% reduction in hospital-acquired infections, infections that are often fatal and cost $30,000 to $90,000 each. A 63% reduction in central line infections since 2001. Half are fatal and each cost $30,000 or more to treat. Staph infections were reduced from 26 per thousand to 8 per thousand.
You can learn systems from the creator who brilliantly designed systems to interact and prosper.
One of the most exciting scientific findings of the past half-century has been the discovery of widespread trophic cascades. A trophic cascade is an ecological process which starts at the top of the food chain and tumbles all the way down to the bottom. And the classic example is what happened in the Yellowstone National Park in the United States when wolves were reintroduced in 1995. Now, we all know that wolves kill various species of animals, but perhaps we're slightly less aware that they give life to many others. Before the wolves turned up, they'd been absent for 70 years. That the numbers of deer, because there was nothing to hunt them, had built up and built up in the Yellowstone Park, and despite efforts by humans to control them, they'd managed to reduce much of the vegetation there to almost nothing. They'd just grazed it away. But as soon as the wolves arrived, even though they were few in number, they started to have the most remarkable effects. First, of course, they killed some of the deer, but that wasn't the major thing. Much more significantly, they radically changed the behavior of the deer. The deer started avoiding certain parts of the park, the places where they could be trapped most easily, particularly the valleys and the gorges. And immediately those places started to regenerate. In some areas, the height of the trees quintupled in just 6 years. Bare valley sides quickly became forests of aspen and willow and cottonwood. And as soon as that happened, the birds started moving in. The number of songbirds and migratory birds started to increase greatly. The number of beavers started to increase because beavers like to eat the trees. And beavers, like wolves, are ecosystem engineers. They create niches for other species. And the dams they built in the rivers provided habitats for otters and muskrats and ducks and fish and reptiles and amphibians. The wolves killed coyotes, and as a result of that, the number of rabbits and mice began to rise, which meant more hawks, more weasels, more foxes, more badgers. Ravens and bald eagles came down to feed on the carrion that the wolves had left. Bears fed on it too, and their population began to rise as well, partly also because there were more berries growing on the regenerating shrubs. And the bears reinforced the impact of the wolves by killing some of the calves of the deer. But here's where it gets really interesting. The wolves changed the behavior of the rivers. They began to meander less. There was less erosion. The channels narrowed, more pools formed, more riffle sections, all of which were great for wildlife habitats. The rivers changed in response to the wolves. And the reason was that the regenerating forests stabilized the banks so that they collapsed less often, so that the rivers became more fixed in their course. Similarly, by driving the deer out of some places and the vegetation recovering on the valley sides, there was less soil erosion because the vegetation stabilized that as well. So the wolves, small in number, transformed not just the ecosystem of the Yellowstone National Park, this huge area of land, but also its physical geography.
Just one more thing. Workers need to know what their job is as it relates to the ideal. As Dr. Deming would urge upper managers, quality and transformation is everyone's job. Their journey to the ideal begins with systems thinking empowerment. All workers are assigned to take ownership of quality control, quality improvement, and quality transformation. Therefore, all departments must now cooperate and depend on each other for achieving the ideal. So let's raise our people outcomes to the same level as our product and profitability outcomes. So let's recap for starting today. Study systems thinking inside and outside of your industry for the purpose of holistically creating an ideal design. Remember, a system is a whole made up of a collection of parts that interact to produce results not obtainable by the elements alone. The essential properties of the whole are found in the interactions of the parts. The ideal design of the organization is that it can address and solve future challenges today. Map current processes to identify the constraints as a basis for redesigning processes to the ideal. Value is created by studying the interactions within the system. While designing the ideal, compare the results with the current system and make adjustments for improving the design. Connect the silos. Everyone cooperates for the benefit of the system and serving others. And every problem, no matter where it appears, is best approached from a variety of points of view. Design the ideal based on what you want, not just on what you don't want. Test, test, test endlessly. Simplify and test solution scenarios. Create future-based crisis scenarios that keep the organization future-ready. focus on improving organization-wide quality over cost-cutting, determine when to implement continuous improvement or when you need innovation, drive out fear so people can operate in freedom, and finally, empower all workers to take ownership of quality and transformation. Gmalarik is part of your team for creating a more valuable future-ready organization today. We bring velocity to achieving your ideal.